So today, I'm super excited. I'm super excited to welcome you to Justice for All, a family and community-driven movement to promote justice and unity by what's becoming a very fast friend of mine, Cherie Craft. Um, and I met Cherie when she did a similar webinar with another organization, and I was like, oh my God, I have to have her on the webinar. I have to share her with our Be Strong Families family. So let me tell you a little bit about her, okay? Cherie Craft, MD, MED, founder, CEO, and executive director of Smart from the Start, studies sociology and counseling as an undergrad, and holds a master's degree in counseling psychology. She is considered an expert in the field of early childhood education, community organizing, cultural competence, and mental health. She has addressed audiences nationally and internationally, presenting upon a wide range of topics, specifically focusing on addressing social determinants of health and advancing the causes of equity and equality. Ms. Craft served 5 years on the Boston Children's Hospital Community Advisory Board, 2 terms as a member of the National Expert Panel on Substance Abuse and Child Welfare, and for the past 20 years has been senior faculty with the International Institute for Family Centered Care. In 2007, Ms. Craft founded a comprehensive community-based child and family service organization, Smart from the Start, where she currently serves as a CEO and executive director. It is my pleasure to welcome you, Cherie, to our daily webinar. Welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarita. It is such a joy to be here and just to spend time with you as a kindred spirit. We share much of the same values and love for the community, and I'm just really honored to have been invited to join you all this afternoon. Andrew, next slide. So today we're going to have an opportunity to talk about Smart from the Start and our family-driven initiative, Justice for All. Justice for All is our step onto the front lines of the new racial, social justice movement that is spreading across the country and was designed and stood up by our family leadership team. So I think we'll start by talking a little bit about Smart from the Start and introducing you to our organization and our program model, and then we'll roll into Justice for All and talk with you a little bit about how we work with our families and communities to promote change on multiple levels. Next slide, please. So I want to get to some Q&A, so I'm not going to read every slide. This is our mission statement, and I will just say that all these cute kids that are embedded in this presentation are Smart from the Start, enrolled, brilliant future leaders. And so here's these cuties right here whose mom is part of our family leadership team. What I will say about our mission is that, you know, when we talk about being strengths-based, I think, you know, there's a lot of buzzwords going around, asset-based and, you know, strengths-based. What we believe in our heart of hearts is that every single family, every single individual, every single child has strengths. And that as social service providers, oftentimes we're trained to assess and address families from more of a deficit-based approach, looking at what's wrong with the family, almost like a medical model where you're diagnosing and then prescribing treatments for families. And what we feel is like we've had generations of families caught up in the same cycles. And we believe that in order to break those cycles, we need to really make that paradigm shift where we are recognizing the strengths and resiliencies of our communities, our families, our children, and that we're introducing them to those strengths, often for the first time. And when we do that, we create relationships that have as a foundation real trust, real mutual respect. And that is how we're able to do things with families and for families and encourage them to do things for themselves that they never before imagined possible. Next slide, please. This is our vision. This little baby in this yellow, I mean, it doesn't matter what's going on with the weather, what's going on with the organization. This picture, this baby just, this picture reminds me that there is hope in the world and that we have to keep fighting. And this is our vision for the world that we hope to create.
Next slide, Andrew.
So here are some of our goals and objectives. And, we believe that our strength is in our partnerships, and we're a small but mighty organization. So much of our capacity is attributed to great partnerships that we have across the spectrum: community partnerships, agency partnerships, government partnerships as well. And our goals include, providing opportunities for our children to engage in high quality early education programs that reflect the diversity of our communities, that are trauma informed, that address the domains that will determine school success, so that we are preventing the academic achievement gap instead of trying to close it once it exists, but also providing our families with everything they feel they need in order to create environments that are conducive to healthy development. Next slide. So this model by the Aspen Institute kind of provides a visualization of how we feel all of these things work together, and SMART addresses each one of these circle aspects of this model, in terms of making sure that when we promote our theory of change, that it is ecological and comprehensive, so that we recognize that while there are great early childhood programs, and there are great employment and adult education programs and financial literacy programs and so forth, that once we're able to put all of those programs and services together in one place under one roof, that is when we really see change, sustainable change happening for kids and families. Next slide. So here are some brief facts about SMART. We have a paid family leadership team that governs our organization side by side with our board of directors. They help with the design, implementation, co-facilitation, and evaluation of all programs. They sit on our board of directors. They provide us with assistance in recruiting and training, orienting new staff, and they are right there with us shoulder to shoulder as we stood up SMART from the start, and as we continue to grow and expand our organization. We started our program in 2007. And we're about 15 years old. We serve about 2,000 families across Boston and Washington, D.C. Next slide. So as we all know, and it sounds like Sarita was pretty quick to get her programming up on Zoom once COVID hit. It hit our communities really hard. And for those of us who work on the ground and are from the communities, I grew up in a housing project just like the ones that we work in now. So I know that if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready, is what my grandmother used to say. And so we quickly were able to mobilize our team to make sure that families had what they needed at home in order to the degree possible, weather the storm. We had no idea it was going to be 2 years. But we got right to work putting all of our programs and services on Zoom, making sure everyone had the technological capacity to participate, that our kids had online tutoring, and so on and so forth. But that, as you can see, this is Matt on my team. Shout out to Matt if he's on here. He may be busy doing something like he's doing in this picture, snowing in Boston. But COVID hit the community hard. Next slide. These are some of the things that we've been able to do during COVID in terms of programming and community support. But one of the things that COVID did inspire, I think, was a new level of awareness around what's been happening for, generations in our communities with racial and social injustice. And folks were kind of a captive audience when the murder of George Floyd hit the news. And when Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and the list goes on, and a new focus, I think, on this generation's fight for civil and social justice came about. And when that happened for us, our family leaders decided that they wanted to do something to make a change. So that's where Justice for All came from. I'll give you a little bit more of a background on SMART. Next slide. So these are some of the programs that we offer for our children, ages 0 to 17. Next slide. These are some of the programs that we offer for our parents and caregivers. And these, again, that's one of our babies there. These are our families. Next slide. These are some of our outcomes. We do invest in independent evaluation every year. And our evaluation is done by Tufts University. And I think for us, there are a couple of these data points that we are very proud of. And one of them is that we have been able to show over a 50% decrease in depressive symptoms among our families, even during the pandemic. And we attribute that to our Address the Stress program, which is an opportunity for our families to engage in culturally reflective group, family, individual, and play therapy on Zoom now, but ordinarily in person. And the other one is we have a program that is specifically for our young fathers. Upon entry, the overwhelming majority of them have had some action with the criminal injustice system. And we have about an 8% recidivism rate among the young men who engage in our program. And by contrast, in both of our cities, DC and Boston, there is between an 82 and a 91% recidivism rate for young men. So that's a huge drop, and that's something we're very proud of. Of course, our Fathers program was designed by fathers who have lived experience. So we attribute that to the success of that program. Next slide. And finally, we do a lot of work around inspiring hope and planning for the future so that we're breaking cycles of generational poverty and instead promoting generational wealth. Next slide. All right, so we want to talk today about our Justice for All program. And what we realized during this pandemic is that there are a number of folks who serve our families and communities organizations who we had not heard from, in a real way in terms of promoting equity and justice for the populations that we serve. And for us in our quest to promote early education and the health and wellness of kids and families, the two cannot they're not mutually exclusive. If we are going to promote the healthy development of kids and families, if we are going to prevent the academic achievement gap and ensure that our children have every opportunity to reach their greatest potential, we have got to address the inequity and injustice across systems and services in our society. And so kudos to 0 to 3 for this statement. Next slide. So these are smart families marching in DC. This is one of our family leaders in Boston at a protest right after the murder of George Floyd. And I have to tell you that, I grew up in a household where racial and social justice was the soup du jour. So both of my parents were very active in our community. We didn't have any money, but we had a lot of love and a lot of pride in our house. And it makes me so proud of these families that they are continuing that tradition of fighting injustice, regardless of the circumstances that we're in. We know that where there are people, there's power, as Fred Hampton would say, and that they are powerhouses in terms of making change. So when they decided that they wanted to do something more deliberate in terms of standing at the forefront of this movement, we, of course, were very supportive. And this is how Justice for All, the Justice for All initiative was born. Next slide. Here are some ways that we advance equity and empower. We, across the board, and we serve a very diverse population of kids and families, but They also help us to make sure that our curricula, our programs and services reflect the diversity of the communities that we serve. We make sure that even if our children are not getting access to real American history in public schools, that in our communities, we take the responsibility for teaching our kids about their history. And we work with our families to create multiple opportunities for them to engage both in civic action, in advocacy, and policy change. And those are some of the roots of J for A. Next slide. And again, we make sure that we incorporate multiculturalism and heritage, our kids' heritage. And like I said, we have families from all over the world. So, you know, you can walk into Smart from the Start in some neighborhoods, particularly in Boston, and it is a United Nations. And they will be singing a song in Haitian Creole 1 minute, and they'll be playing a game in Cantonese the next minute. But it is just such an enriching way for our children to be welcomed into the world and to realize that our diversity makes us stronger, and not so much a melting pot, but a mosaic, right? So that all of the colors and all of the richness is distinct, but it all fits together nicely. Next slide. So J for A, Justice for All. Justice for All is our initiative. We call it a movement. And it is a movement to make real change on the ground and in systems and services that our families interact with in order to make long-term sustainable change that will benefit our kids. Next slide. Justice for All stands on 4 pillars: empowerment, advocacy, policy change, and disrupt and dismantle the cradle to prison pipeline. Each one of these pillars has a specific action plan that has been developed with our families taking the lead, along with members of my staff and our board and some supporters and funders. Empowerment is really about providing our communities with training, with access to information, with resources to empower them to be able to be an informed part of this movement. As we thought about advocacy and how SMART provided advocacy, we wanted to be more focused on making sure that there are people on the other end of a phone line that folks could reach out to if they need help with legal issues, if they're having issues in schools, if they are having problems with the court system or child welfare, that we almost have like a hotline. We hired new staff thanks to our families and giving us our marching orders in family support. We have family support specialists, we have family advocates and folks that are devoted to ensuring that our families have direct access to whatever supports they need in order to address racial and social justice issues in real time, and that we're not giving them a phone number or sending them to another agency, but that we're connecting them. The other thing is training our families and our family leaders to provide advocacy to other families in their community. So there's a whole action plan for each of these. Policy change. We've been able to mobilize our family leaders, our board, and our community to address issues that our families have determined are important to them. So they've set their own policy agenda. And we work with our legislators, with our local politicians and so forth, so that we're able to help our families to lift their voices and lend their voices as policymakers are developing policy. And then finally, the disrupt and dismantle the cradle to prison pipeline is really identifying and confronting issues from maternal mortality and infant mortality and inequities in the healthcare system, all the way through the continuum of programs, services, and systems that our families engage in from the time a child is born, that oftentimes, because of systemic racism, lead our kids from the cradle right to the prison. And we are looking to blow that thing up. We are working with legislators, we are working with advocates and stakeholders to really put our families at the front of this movement, but to address those issues in a way that we are actually able to help them to leverage their power, whether it's at the voting, at the polls, or whether it's as a part of the PTO, or whether it's running for resident councils so that they're on the housing authority boards, whether it is, on the DCF or CFSA advisory boards for child welfare, that at multiple levels, we're getting our families involved in disrupting those systems. Next slide. SMART starts the conversation. And so during the pandemic, when Justice for All launched, we realized that it was a great time for us to engage multiple different populations and perspectives in forums such as this, right? So SMART starts the conversations are scheduled Zoom conversations where we confront and address a number of different issues that pertain to racial and social justice. And so these are just a few examples of conversations that we facilitated, and our families are on there, our teams on there, our board members, we've got donors that join us, folks of good faith who are interested in getting together and learning more about this movement, engaging in conversation and dialogue in a safe space where, folks from different perspectives who are all of goodwill have a chance to really find a way to speak in a common language and promote unity and justice. And we call it Starts the Conversation because the idea is that we come together for these events and we start the conversation and we give folks language and understanding so that they can continue the conversation out in their own corners of the world. So whether it's at the dinner table or on the golf course or wherever it is, we encourage folks to start the conversation with us and continue it in ways that they can contribute to the movement by promoting unity and understanding in their own lives.
That sounds very much like cafes. And
well, this is
are
why
those open? I know this is why we connected. As I'm listening to you, I'm like, wow. Are these open to everyone?
Oh, yes, absolutely. They are. So I think Lindsay included your team on the last one. I forget which one
I did. We'll have to get the link and drop it. Can we drop it? Is it the same link for everyone or is it a different link for each time?
So I will check with
Because
Lindsay.
if it's the same link.
What we will do is, yes, I will send it to you. I believe it's the same link, and you can just drop it and we'll have the dates and for you. Yes, wonderful. So J for A Junior, as we launch Justice for All, we have our youth leaders and we try to roll them into Justice for All. And they said, this is all well and good, but as youth leaders, we have the issues that are important to us, and they may be different than those of our parents. And we want to start our own Justice for All initiative. And so that is where Justice for All Junior was born. And our youth leaders are just absolutely so powerful and so brilliant. And they have their own policy agenda. And, they've engaged in a number of different trainings and workshops, and they have their own events as well for youth. So we'll have to share those with you as well, Sarita. So we come together on some projects, but J for A Junior, they do a lot of community service work as well. They fed the homeless. They did a blanket hat and scarf drive where they went out into Southeast DC and handed out blankets and scarves and hats to folks who are out on the street. They do a lot of really cool things with J for A Junior. So we'll have to share some of those events as well. Next slide. So our Civil Rights Summer Pilgrimage. This event last year was kind of the brainchild that came to be after one of our conversations where we had done a virtual civil rights tour of the country. And, virtually we visited all of these landmarks and, civil rights historical sites. And it was 2 hours. We couldn't possibly do it justice. And after that that conversation, and the families were saying, "Oh, I wish I could go to Whitney Plantation in Louisiana, and I wish I could see where Emmett Till, where Emmett Till's murder happened. I would like to pray at that spot. And I said to my staff, wouldn't it be wild if we could just like put a bunch of families on a bus and go on this pilgrimage? And they're like, yeah, that would be wild. I'm like, oh yeah, well then let's do it. And so we did it. And so last summer, the last week in July and the first week in August, we took 49 youth and family leaders. I made 50 on the bus. And we took them on what we call the Civil Rights Summer Pilgrimage. And it kind of put us in mind of the Freedom Riders during the 50s and the 60s that ventured down south in order to fight for racial and social justice. And these are our families on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Next slide. This is our itinerary at a glance. These are all of the places that we went. We went to Harriet Tubman's Museum, and we went to the 1619 landing where the first slave ships came in. We went to the Martin Luther King Historical Center in Atlanta, of course. As you saw, we marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. We went to the Lorraine Motel where Martin Luther King was assassinated, which is now a museum there. And so we hit the road. And next slide. As you can see, there were 49 youth and adult change makers that ages 6 to 65. We made 18 stops across 16 states in 12 days. And as you can see, we got those little ones right up in the front. So it was just a fantastic experience. Next slide.
So you took the babies with you?
We took the babies. So we didn't go, 6 was the cutoff. And I still have my fingers and toes crossed, Sarita, because I was like, I'm on the other end of that age range, 50. And then with the babies, I'm like, oh God, please. But they were so well behaved. I was so proud of them.
Well, how many were there? Let me just, was it a lot or just like that little handful? Like
so there were probably about 8 kids between the ages of 6 and 9. So not too bad, not too bad. And then we had a bunch of teenagers. Now we had some teenagers on it. And I was really pleased at how well they behaved. I mean, they were so engrossed in, in the whole historical context. You almost could see a whole change coming over them. And just like the squaring of their shoulders as they realized that enslaved Africans were brilliant people to be proud of, that endured and built this entire country. And so we have a video that I'd like to show, and that after we show the video, we'll still have about 13 minutes for Q&A.
Okay, cool.
Andrew?
Sounds good.
This is our home video. SMART has always done some iteration of justice for all. We always believed from the bottom of our hearts that the change that we seek in our community is going to come from the bottom up. Justice for All has developed 4 pillars that our program is standing on: empowerment, advocacy, policy change, and disrupt and dismantle.
Justice for All, right now, I'm focused on empowering our families to advocate for themselves against injustices they may face. They feel racially profiled or just treated unjust in any system. They know the steps to take to get help and to get on the same playing field as everybody else.
I have 2 young boys that's one day gonna grow up to be George Floyd's age, so I wouldn't want that to happen to them. So it's good now that we get involved and try to educate not only ourselves, but also the police and everyone else involved, so we can try to put an end to this and make the world peaceful for everybody.
As a SMART from the Start leader, it's important to get my community, my friends, my family involved in the Justice for All movement, because it's going to take a whole team.
Justice for All Junior is really an opportunity for our youth to define what policies and what issues are important to them, and to help them learn how to lend their voices and raise their voices in a productive way to promote social change.
In this world, I was taught, a lot of people who come from where I come from or of my color, they have to work twice as hard just to keep up with a lot of people in society. I want all my work to pay off. I don't want to have to work twice or 3 times as hard as somebody else and then end up in the same place or even, behind them. So, I just feel like once that opportunity is given to everybody the same way, then we can fix everything else.
Us teens and Justice for All will make a change. You will see us one day.
So the whole idea of the pilgrimage came about as we were thinking about how best to empower and educate our youth and family leaders about the civil rights movement and the whole mission and movement towards racial and social justice. And what we realized is the 4 pillars that Justice for All sits on, empowerment, advocacy, policy change, and disrupt and dismantle the cradle to prison pipeline are not new to the civil rights movement. That there is a long history and legacy of folks, heroes and ordinary folks who were engaged in this struggle and who were pushing and driving change on all 4 of those platforms. So there was something that is to be said about experiential learning and being in the place. Our kids are not learning true American history, and to see them almost square their shoulders as they learned, and really came to believe that slavery was not something for them to be ashamed of, that enslaved Africans were brilliant, beautiful, gifted human beings, and that there were so many other folks that pitched in to help bring about the social change that we were able to accomplish during all of these different iterations of the civil rights movement. And to watch our kids learn that and the pride that they should have in their history, in their heritage, and to really kind of equate that to the struggle for justice and equality today was it was an astounding thing to witness.
When we were chained up and acting as if we were slaves, just thinking about what they went through.
They get tied up around the neck, the hand, the waist, the foot. They do not wear any shoes. And I remember if someone speaks, the master would say something about the person in front of you get 15 lashes. The person in back of you get 30 lashes.
My favorite part, besides when we went to the slave trail, because that was just such a heartfelt moment, it would also be when we did the libation. I never knew that the first slave ship, the 1619 landing, I never knew that it was right there. We paid homage to our ancestors again, and that was very fun as well. But at the same time, we were also very serious because we had to acknowledge how much hard work they had to do so we could be to where we are right now.
My favorite adventure was the first day. We went to Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman had to leave and come back, rescue people, help people. She made it through. She's doing it for us.
The pilgrimage itself, it touched me internally. It did something for me as a father. It did something for me as an African American man here in America. We learned a lot of things about ourselves through the eyes and the windows of our history, like the past that we were taught. It was just so riveting and so touching, standing on those soils and those plantations. I felt the past. I felt the torment, the torture.
The Whitney plantation will forever be in my mind and forever be in my soul, because I would never want anybody to go through that type of pain or harm, or have fear of being in that type of pain.
It opened my eyes to modern day slavery, and like the ways that, like how slavery isn't here, but it's still put into the system systematically, economically, politically, and it just opened my eyes and made me want to dig deeper into the way they try to hold us back in a sense, and also really like push myself to go forward and achieve everything I want to achieve, do everything I want to do, and not let the color of my skin stop me, or because I'm a woman stop me.
During the pilgrimage, I got to saw the bus that Rosa Parks was on, seeing her in the front seat and the driver telling her to get off, but she refused to get off.
One of the most eye-opening parts of the trip was driving down the road where Emmett Till was driven down before he was brutally murdered. And throughout that time, I just felt fear, wondering where I'm at, just confused. That fear of just being in such an unfamiliar place really got at me, and I can't imagine how Emmett Till had felt in that moment.
When I went to the Lorraine Motel, when I got there, I felt like kind of empowered, because I was like, dang, I walked the same trail that Martin Luther King walked to get to his hotel. It's like, okay, this is really some high-level stuff.
The Lynching Memorial that was in Alabama will also forever shape my future and how I see life.
They had like a collection of the dirt and the soil that people were lynched on. And it was about more than 30 of them. Seeing all the soil where the people were lynched on, that was just really sad, because I couldn't believe that it was so many of them. I knew that people were getting lynched back in the day, but I didn't know that they were doing it that much, to the point where you could like literally go around and collect soil, and it was in almost every state. So I didn't know those things.
And to know that they had to suffer those consequences makes me like not want to ever be selfish when it comes to doing liberation work for other Black and brown people and people of color. Because at the end of the day, somebody stepped up for me, and I must step up for the next person or the future generations that are coming.
I wasn't expecting myself to break down the way I did, for sure, but there were definitely a few times that I broke down, specifically at the Equal Justice Initiative Museum. That was very, very, very eye-opening for me to see the actual writings from some of the people in jail, some of them as young as like 9 and 10 years old. The Equal Justice Initiative, they handle cases that have been dismissed and are believed to have been involved with some racial discrimination. I was really moved by the information they had shared, as well as their own personal stories. And I want to switch my major in school from business management to criminal law.
I liked how you were walking just like the other people walked across the.
I just felt like I was overjoyed, and I wanted to lead people like how they live, like in a march. I want to be a leader instead of a follower. If you're a follower, then you're just going to fall right behind people and do the wrong things.
The Edmund Pettus Bridge within itself was big for me. That bridge is symbolic to where I come from and where I'm headed to. To cross it, to walk over it, to stand on it. It was an elevating experience for me.
We also had a number of cultural and musical and food experiences. We were able to learn about what we've contributed and how great and how powerful we are. And how much of the United States as a culture is reflected upon us.
If I could do it again, I would, and I would bring a lot of people with me. You can't know where you're going if you don't know where you came from. So I felt like, coming back home, it made me even more want to get into, fighting for equality and justice and building my community up and seeing how I could be a better help within my community, instilling that into my kids and other kids whose lives I impact every day.
I believe in being a freedom fighter. No matter what generation you're in, you can always be a freedom fighter, and you can always go on to change the world no matter who you are.
The last thing I wanted to say was that a big thing that made me happy when I came home was that never turn your blackness down for nobody, because black is who you are and that is what you were born to be.
So what happens now? The pilgrimage wasn't just about this journey this summer. It really was about setting the stage for the future of Justice for All. A huge part of being leaders in the community and having this just amazing opportunity is to take what you learned, what you felt, what you got from this experience and to pay that forward. It's about building on the lessons learned of those whose shoulders we're standing on, those who fought the good fight for racial and social justice before us, about building the cohort of informed, engaged, and empowered youth and family leaders in our communities. And what that means is opening up this opportunity to other kids and families who are interested in continuing the fight for racial and social justice in our communities and giving them an opportunity to experience the pilgrimage as well.
That was beautiful.
Thank you. Like going all over again.
That was beautiful. I found myself wishing, like, dang, I should have been on that trip. Now, let me ask you, are all the parents child welfare involved? And do they have to be? And if they're not, do they have to be in order to take part or participate in Smart Start?
No, so they're not all. Some are. We are funded through our child welfare system in DC and Boston through our state funding as a preventative program as well. So we do a lot of upstream kind of work in terms of helping families to stabilize and to thrive in ways that prevent them from entering the system as well. So probably about 50-50.
Okay. So are you taking questions right now?
I'm taking questions.
If you have any questions for Cherie about anything that she shared today, now is the time to drop them in the chat. Or you can simply raise your hand and Andrew will bring you on with us and you can share your question. Okay, so I'll give you guys a minute to type your question or to raise your hand. And maybe you're eating lunch. It's like, wait, I got a question. Oh, we do have a hand raised. Lawan? Going to...
That's a beautiful presentation. I would like to know, how would you refer like our families to participate in that spiritual food that's much needed for our families in DC?
Smartfromthestart.org. You can go right on our website and give us a call. We are right now, we're kind of concentrated in Ward 8. We've got 3 centers right off of Alabama Ave in that in that area. And we would love, love, love for you to refer families to SMART. So smartfromthestart.org is the way to do it. You can go on there and send us an email, or you can just get the phone number, pick up the phone, and give us a call.
Thank you, Luan. So this was how 21 days?
12.
How many days? 12? I thought I
I
saw
don't know if I could have
somewhere. I'm
survived
like, oh
20
my
days.
gosh. I was like, oh my gosh, 21.
But it was like a marathon.
Yeah.
I mean, every day we were hitting 1 or 2 landmarks. We had a couple of days that were just on the road, but you can imagine we started in Boston and we went all the way down, kind of like the Eastern Seaboard from Boston. You know, we picked up families in DC, and then we hit, you know, Harriet Tubman's Museum in Maryland. We went to 1619 Landing in Hampton. We went to Richmond, to the excavated slave jails in Richmond, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and then Tennessee.
And the parents helped to map out these spaces that they wanted to go, or was
They
it
helped.
primarily staff, or they helped? You did it together?
No, so we had a whole list of places. Like Sarita, we had at least 2-3 times as many places, and the family leaders helped us to narrow it down to, you know, to the ones that we were able to hit. And then we had to try to work with, you know, geographically how we moved around to get from Selma to Montgomery to, you know, Birmingham, or however it went. And then we stayed in hotels every night. All expenses were paid, even souvenirs. So families did not have to bring $1. They had gift cards and stipends, so that if they wanted to, you know, go buy a Happy Meal, a bottle of water, a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, whatever it is, they had funds. Yeah, everything was paid for. And let me say this as a person who's advanced in my years, we stayed in very nice hotels. No Motel 6, all either Marriott or Hilton brand hotels.
Cool. Andrew, so what places were especially impactful for you?
For me personally, it was the Memorial for Peace and Justice, and that was what the kids were calling the Lynching Museum. And my family, my dad's family, migrated to DC from Georgia when he was an infant because his grandfather was lynched. And so, you know, going to that, walking through that memorial was so emotional for me. And, you know, there were thousands and thousands of names. Each of those names, though, the story had to be corroborated twice. So you can imagine that there were a lot of folks who were lynched whose names were not etched in one of those columns. And there was one huge memorial to them. And it said, you know, this waterfall is a dedication to folks whose names we will never know, but who suffered the same fate. And I think that was for us the most powerful, for me anyway, the most powerful experience. And there we got to meet with Brian Stevenson staff. Brian Stevenson is the founder of the Peace and Justice Initiative, and he was the attorney in the movie Just Mercy. And so, as you know, he started an organization that has had over 200 people of color freed from death row, and he's the one who founded the museum.
Wow. And then we have another question from Roy. This is, what type of support do you provide families who are dealing with DCFS, Department of Children Families, inquiring as a Black foster parent from Indiana?
So we have an array of supports, and I think actually one of my family supports specialists, the leader of that department, is on this call with me. We provide folks with everything from helping them immediately when the care and protection is filed, getting in touch with whoever the DCF worker is, letting them know that the family has advocacy, that we are going to help them know what their rights are, help them negotiate whatever service plan deliverables they have. We go to court with families. We help them with either keeping the child in the family, or if there's a kinship placement that the family would prefer, until we're able to have the family reunited. We also provide an array of services on site, like counseling, mandated parenting, support for our fathers. We have a number of fathers who have gotten custody of their children, even when the mom was not in a position to. So we provide from the very beginning, from when the phone call is made all the way through the process. We provide an array of supports. Also, if we feel like they're not getting good legal support, we will step in and get them a lawyer.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Any other questions? I had one, and then you started answering another question, and it completely blew my mind. I was about to write it down too. Um, it was a good one. Look, it was a good one.
It was a good one.
It was a good one because it was a good one because it was coming from me, so it was a good one. But I lost it.
I will say this, that like everywhere we went, even, you know, we stopped at the Woolworths where the first sit-ins, lunch counter sit-ins were. There was, I mean, it was such a heavy day every day that we tried to balance that heaviness out. We did journaling, so we provided everybody with beautiful journals. We did journaling. We did right there at the site where Emmett Till was lynched at that was the store that the Bryants owned. We did a restorative circle right there so that people would have a chance to just try to come to terms and talk about and work through some of the emotion. We tried to debrief everything, and then we have fun. So we would get to the hotel. It was hot because it was summer. We would have pool parties and pizza parties, and you know, my staff. I would tell my staff, "You guys go on out, you know, have some dinner. The teams and I will watch the little kids, you know, let the families, you know, unwind a little bit." So we try to balance out, you know, the emotion because it was heavy.
I did it. This is the question I had. So you guys did this in 2021. Yes, 2020 or 2021?
21.
In 21, and that was at the height of the civil, was that during the civil unrest, or we were still coming off of the civil unrest?
Oh, it
Were
was
you
during
at,
the civil.
it was during it. So were you at all concerned? I don't know. I had a picture of all these beautiful black men um in the South.
We were
Was that
concerned.
ever a concern?
We were concerned, and you know, we actually did meet some folks. You know, I was concerned. I mean, we went to, you know, we were stopping at rest stops in Mississippi and, you know, Alabama and rural parts. We were very careful about where we chose to bed down for the night. So even where the hotels were and so forth, we were very careful about that. We met some people who had some interesting things to say to us.
I'm
But
sure.
no, you know, there was no threat of violence, although we were
Okay.
prepared for it. I mean,
Yeah.
we had, you know, contingency plans. We were prepared for it, but we met, by accident, we drove onto someone's land in South Carolina, and the gentleman came out, and all the guys on the bus were stood up, you know, and I got off the bus and they're like, "Wait a minute, we're going to go with you." And I engaged this guy in a conversation. He's like, "Oh yeah, Yankees come down here all the time." But he was very courteous. And, you know, so I think for us, there was also kind of I think a realization that we also have these stereotypes that,
Yeah.
you know, that often, you know, are not necessarily always true. So.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I was thinking about that and like, oh my goodness, I don't, woo! That's, you
Yes.
know, thank God that some people don't ever have to worry about that. But that's always a real, you
It's
know,
always a concern.
always a concern. So I just want to say, I almost forgot, starting the conversation, I almost forgot I had some closing stuff. So, I guess this is you, Cherie.
Yes. So this is just, you know, in conclusion, this is an excerpt from Promoting Healthy Equity, a resource to help communities address social determinants of health from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control. And I just find this to be really a great way to sum up what we need to do in order to really advance change. Thank you all. I really appreciate having this opportunity to spend time with you this afternoon, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you all. Please reach out.
That's her information on the screen. Be sure to take a screenshot if you need to. I can't thank you enough, Cherie. I know how busy you are. So it's such a pleasure and
It
honor to
was a
have you with us
pleasure. It was a
today.
pleasure. Thank you so much.
There is a poll going on, so please be sure to take the poll. And as we do for every webinar, we're going to ask you to amplify something. Take away something that you're amplifying from today's webinar. Amplify, hashtag amplify justice for all. Hashtag amplify keeping people safe. Hashtag, social awareness. Hashtag give us a good amplify. Thank you, Luan. Yes, love. Yeah. Put them in there. Amplify truth for freedom. Everyone is saying thank you because they thought it was amazing. Carmen said hope. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Don't forget to join us for this Friday's Taste of Vitality Cafe. We have one every Friday led by our National Parent Cafe leadership team. They're excited to host you and to hold space for you for this fantastic conversation. And next week, what's today? Today's Wednesday. Okay, so tomorrow's their Spanish, and then next week we have our webinars is Chat Boxes My Way. Following their footsteps, a conversation about women's history with Tiffany and Jennifer, and then a parent's perspective, violence in the schools with Tanisha Wright. So we are excited about all of our webinars, and we invite you to come back and join us next week. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us and like us on YouTube. Cherie will also have this link available for you after the webinar for you to share with your networks. So thank you guys, and thank you, Cherie, again. I really enjoyed you, and I
Thank
can't
you,
wait to our
Sarita.
next check-in.
Yes, me too. I'm looking forward to it. Take care. Thank you,
Thank
Andrew.
you.